First, Shilian had planned to show off his culinary skills. However, after tonight, his confidence plunged by a millionfold. Hua Chang had suggested that he could make dinner instead. But how could Shilian have the face to ask him to cook after Hua Chang fixed his door and cleaned his shrine too? Who in their right mind would treat their guests this way? Besides, who did he take an esteemed Supreme Ghost King for? Fortunately, he brought plenty of supplies back from town. Although a large portion of it went into Shilian's pot, there was still some buns and pies and veggies and fruits left. So they munched on what they had. But after munching, what then? The next day, the problem was solved on its own. Bright and early in the morning, the door of Poochie's shrine opened to the knocking of a bunch of village girls who had come to offer large pots of porridge and a roast chicken. The village girls were shy and anxious, so who they came for was quite obvious. Shilian couldn't help but sigh in awe to himself, thinking that beauty really could fill his stomach. That roast chicken was divided between the two children. Shilian only had some porridge, and Hua Chang didn't touch anything. He smiled. "Gurga is really popular in this area," he said. Shilian laughed. "Don't tease me, Sun Lung." They were obviously drunk, but not on wine. After that bowl went down, Rong was bound outside the shrine for an entire night, howling and screeching, yelling things along the lines of, "I'd rather be captured by Lang Chen Chou, be butchered to 1,000,000 pieces, than to be stuck here and fed poison by you. Cousin Crown Prince, I'm wrong. Please, I beg you, give me the antidote." He even seemed to start hallucinating and became delusional. Little Goosey was horrified. By early morning, Rong was shriveled up and sucked dry, his face completely green. He lapped at the porridge that Goosey held in his hand before finally regaining some strength. He croaked out with a broken voice, "Bullshit! Popular! Who the hell would come for him? Look at that shabby appearance. Also, don't be so full of yourself, Hua Chang, you fucker. You can only attract some country chicks from remote places like these at most. They only come clinging because you're dressed so extravagantly. If you dressed the part of a beggar, I doubt they'd even look at you." Shilian thought that this wasn't right at all. Even if Hua Chang dressed like a beggar, Shilian believed, should he go begging, he would collect a mountain of gold. Still, Shilian said nothing and started doing chores leisurely. After a while, another wave of smells wafted outside, and Rong roared again. "What are you doing now? What the hell?" Shilian replied warmly, "The pot of love for all seasons stew. I'm heating it up." Hearing this, Hua Chang applauded softly. "What a good name," he said. Rong yelled, "You gave that fucking thing a name? Stop!" Just the smell from heating it up reminded Rong of his terrifying memories. Afraid that Shilian really would feed that to him again, he didn't dare speak more. After finishing the meal, Lang Ying silently collected the cutlery, as if going to do the dishes. Shilian chided, "Let it be. Just go play, I can take care of this." Maybe he wasn't allowed to cook, but he could still do the dishes. Hua Chang watched Lang Ying take Goosey outside to play and said, "Let me do them." Shilian declined the offer. "There's even less reason for you to do them. Just sit." Before he finished speaking, they heard Rong, who had been bored with nothing to do after having filled his stomach, make catcalls. He spoke with a greasy tone. "Hey, chick, what are you doing checking me out? Did I make your little tender heart quiver?" The ghost had just been griping about how he didn't care for country girls, but then turned around and started flirting, and so tastelessly too. Shilian shook his head, thinking he'd best drag Rong in after all, lest he scare people while stuck outside. Unexpectedly, before he even opened the door, voices of awe from the villagers rang out. Whoa! Legendary beauty! Why would such beautiful ladies come to our village? I've never seen such pretty ladies in my life, and there's 2 of them. Soon after, there was a series of knocks on the door of Puchi Shrine. Shilian was puzzled. Legendary beauty? 2 of them? Why would 2 legendary beauties come knocking on my door? Ah, could it be? Did that wealthy merchant bring his new wives to come return their gratitude? Thinking that this could very well be the case, Shilin hurriedly grabbed for the please donate to help with renovations of the shrine sign, ready to set it outside. But then he heard the frosty voice of one of the women. What is this thing at the door? Burns the eyes. Immediately, the voice of another woman came, sounding puzzled. Maybe it's for guarding the door? No way. There's no reason to sing so low as to use such a vulgar spiritual beast. Although these were female voices, Shilin had clearly heard them before. It was the Wind Master Qing Xuan and the Earth Master Yi. At first, he had wanted to open the door immediately, but then he whipped his head around. He looked at Hua Chang behind him, who was lazily cleaning up the altar table. Shilin stopped his hands, cautiously peeking out the door through the crack instead. Outside the door stood 2 slender and delicate women. One was dressed in white cultivation robes, her lips rosy, her form charming and sensual, with a whisk in her hand. Her eyes were bright. The other was a black-clad woman, with skin as white as snow, brows beautiful and sharp, and yet her expression was dark, looking away into the distance, with her hands clenched in fists. That white-robed woman cultivator had a face full of smiles, waving her hands all around. She giggled. Thanks, everyone. Thank you. No need to compliment so much. No need to make such a show. I'm very troubled with you all like this. That's enough now. Thank you. She giggled again. All around was a large, tightly knit crowd of beauty-watching villagers. After having seen the beauties, they started pointing and bashing Chirong. Chirong was displeased and yelled madly. What are you looking at? So what if this ancestor likes lying on the ground? Fuck off. There's nothing here to see. The villagers saw how freakily that man behaved, looking maliciously violent with the green face, and dispersed in fright. Shijing Xuan turned to Chirong. This green young master, pray tell us, is His Highness the Crown Prince inside the shrine? Hearing that woman address Shelian as His Highness the Crown Prince, Chirong immediately lost interest in the 2 beautiful women before him. He clicked his tongue. So you're shitty officials from the upper heavens, as if this ancestor is a dog guarding his door. Listen here, I am. He hadn't finished before Ming Yi glumly approached, and then there was a wail followed by sounds of smacking. From Shelian's position, he couldn't quite see just what Ming Yi was doing. He could only see Shijing Xuan sweep her whisk, chiding. Ming Xiong, it's not good to use violence. Ming Yi said with a cool tone. What's there to be afraid of? Didn't he say he's not a domesticated spiritual beast? To prevent Chirong from getting beaten to death, Shilin had no choice but to open the door. He raised his hands to stop her. My lord, have mercy. Don't hit him, he's a person. Seeing that Shilin had opened the door, Ming Yi flipped away her black hem and removed her boot from Chirong's back. Shijing Xuan rushed up and clutched her hands in a curtsy gesture. Your Highness, I've come a few days early. What's with that person? He's so full of demonic essence, you can't hide it. Do you take us for blind? Well, let's talk inside. This time, I have something really important that I need your help with. As she spoke, she walked around Chirong, who was lying on the ground, and crossed over the threshold. Hua Chang was still inside, so how could Shelian dare to let them in? He cried hastily, Wait! However, it was too late. Puchi Shrine was only so big and had no places to hide. Immediately, the two saw that behind Shalian's person there stood a supreme ghost king who was in the middle of doing the dishes. 4 pairs of eyes met, sparks flew, and Hua Chang smiled a smile that showed his teeth. The smile was ominous, and his eyes had no trace of mirth. In an instant, Ming Yi's pupils shrank, and she backed 3 feet away. Shi Qingxuan flung out her Windmaster fan, striking an attacking stance, exceedingly alarmed. "Crimson Rain, Sword Flower," she yelled. Outside the door, the ashen-faced Rong roared with rage. "And I'm the night-touring Green Lantern. How come none of you recognized me when beating me, but you knew it was him with just one look?" Ming Yi had once infiltrated the Ghost City and spent many years as a spy under Hua Chang. It was only recently that she had been discovered and captured by Hua Chang, then locked in a maze dungeon and beaten. To have enemies face each other, their eyes bloodshot, tiny little Poochie Shrine was filled with the scent of venom inside and out. Hua Chang tossed the rag in his hand and said with a smirk, "Lord Earthmaster looks lively." Ming Yi also replied coldly, "Lord Ghost King also looks leisurely, as always." After having made false, perfunctory greetings, the next words that came out of Hua Chang's mouth were even colder, his expression icy. "Leave," he warned. "I don't care what important business you have. Do not come anywhere near here again." Although she feared Hua Chang, still she refused to back down meekly. Ming Yi responded with a solemn voice, "To come here was not my will." The venom was going to turn explosive. Next to them, Shilian was growing nervous. "Lord Windmaster, what should we do?" he asked. Shi Qingxuan knocked her fan over her head a few times and said, "I didn't expect Crimson Rain, Sword Flower would be here. Didn't you guys just meet recently? How come you're together again so fast? Anyway, if this can be solved without fists, then that'd be good. Violence is bad. If they start fighting, we'll have to hold them back." "I mostly agree," Shilian said. Rong was hoping that the two would start brawling and had been listening intently. Just then, he suddenly spoke up. "Oh, so you're that slutty woman, Windmaster." Both Shilian and Shi Qingxuan turned to look at him. That was exactly how Rong had called Shi Qingxuan when he was in his own cave. But even before the person herself, he dared curse her like this. Shilian couldn't tell if it was out of bravery or a lack of mental capability. Shi Qingxuan had always been raised in dignified grace, so this was probably the first time hearing someone curse her in this way. She blinked, looking confused, then turned to Shilian. "Your Highness, please wait," she said. Then she left the shrine and closed the door. Outside, there was another desperate wail from Rong and another bout of smacking noises. A moment later, Shi Qingxuan opened the door to come back in. He had returned to his male form. "All right, where were we?" he said. "I'm feeling kind of hungry too, so how about we all sit down and eat something? There's nothing that can't be negotiated and nothing that can't be solved at the dinner table." Shilin didn't want them to start fighting inside Poochie's shrine, but Hua Chang seemed to be extremely angry over the whole affair of Ming Yi's infiltration. Without knowing the inside story, it seemed rather impossible to have them sit down and eat agreeably. However, Hua Chang actually didn't seem to object to the idea. After a frosty moment, the ice on his face cleared away, and he turned back to continue doing the dishes. After he was done, he walked to the pot and ladled a bowl full of that love for all seasons stew. Seeing that he backed down first and ceased the battle, the others all sighed a breath of relief. The next step was to change the subject and liven up the atmosphere. So Shi Qingxuan asked, "Your Highness, what's in the pot? It seems to still be warm." "Oh, I made that," Shilin said. The pot had been stewing for a long time, The flavors were completely soaked in, and most of the smell had already dissipated. Although the color was still questionable, the shapes had all but melted away from the stewing, and it looked much better than it had the night before. Hearing his response, Shi Xuan was vibrating with excitement. Really, he said, I've never eaten anything made by the hands of heavenly officials. Come, 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 let's have a taste. He grabbed for 2 sets of cutlery and filled 2 bowls. To be honest, Xie had wanted to stop them at first. However, Hua Chang had been so firmly encouraging, bearing seeds of confidence within him. Plus, earlier that morning, he had changed up the seasoning according to Hua Chang's suggestions as he heated the stew. So the thought, maybe I saved it, surfaced in his mind. After some hesitation, he didn't say anything. He secretly watched with hope as Shi Xuan passed one of the bowls to Ming Yi. Come, Ming Xiong, he said, this one's yours. Ming Yi took a look at the contents in the bowl. She turned her face away, looking unwilling. It was a rude gesture. Shi Xuan was outraged and forced the bowl to her, unrelenting. Eat, he yelled. Didn't you say earlier, on the road, that you were hungry? Hua Chang lazily raised a spoonful and blew on it. He brought it to his lips, then swallowed. He smiled at Xie and said, It's definitely lighter today. The flavor's just right. Xie smiled back. Really? He asked. I added more water today. Hua Chang took another bite and smiled happily. Gerger did his best, he said. With Hua Chang behaving as though he was tasting some delicious delicacy, it was exceedingly convincing. A moment later, Ming Yi took the bowl, after all, and Shi Xuan smiled. That's better, he said, and the two spooned a mouthful at the same time, taking a bite.